Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Coming Distractions. I'm your host, Jay, and here with me this week is Shyla.
Hi.
Welcome back. This episode we discussed the 2017 romantic dramedy of sorts, The Big Sick, starring Kumail Nanjiani and Zoe Kazan.
I've been dating this girl. She's white.
A white good. It's okay. We hate terrorists.
Is your bad man? I'm looking for Emily Gardner. She was checked in tonight.
You should call her family.
Is that lady still looking at me?
I wonder who that could be.
I'm guessing it's a young, single Pakistani woman.
For your files? Your ex-files? The truth is out there.
I think I'll make tea. Actually, I'll open a bottle of wine. Does Emily have whiskey?
The Big Sick.
So this film is sort of an autobiographical film about the relationship that Kumail and his now wife,
Emily V. Gordon.
yes, who, like, their lives and sort of their very interesting story of how they met and what happens, and we'll talk about that. So, first off, what did you think of this film? As a person, because this is actually, there's a very specific reason why you and I saw this. Mm-hmm. By the way, we're married. This deals heavily with Middle Eastern, specifically in this case, Pakistani culture and the culture around marriage. So what did you think specifically?
Well, as the daughter of a South Asian immigrant from India, who married a redheaded white woman like Emily V. Gordon looks, it was just really interesting seeing it from a perspective of 2017 or 2007 when they got married, right. And the things that seemed similar and things that had changed through this intercultural, interracial relationship.
Right. So I thought this was going to be very well done. I wasn't sure how well they were going to pull the story together, as this, it's sort of a Judd Apatow comedy, sort of the comedies of life kind of film, right? Judd Apatow is the producer. So I wasn't sure about that, but going in, I didn't realize this was a true story. And
I didn't either.
And once I knew that, I was like, oh, okay. So I think they're probably going to get it right. And for me, I thought they absolutely did. It's a very funny movie, a very well done drama, as it were. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. You know, it was interesting because we had talked before. I was getting a little annoyed early on in the show, where in the movie when Kumail was always hitting on the white women at the bar. And right. And it was interesting because two scenes in particular where he was writing the women's name in Urdu and trying to impress them, that the women he was trying to impress were white and their friends seemed to look South Asian.
Yes.
And I don't know if that was intentional, or I can't imagine that wasn't. Right. But it played with that tension of who he should maybe be talking with and who he actually was interested in.
Right. So what's your out of 5 score before we kind of get into a little bit of the details of this?
My 5 out of 5 score originally was going to be maybe a 4, 3.5, 4. Then I found out it was a true story, and that raised it up to about a 4, 4.25. And I have to say that the fact that this is probably one of the only movies I've ever seen where there's a South Asian male romantic interest, I find really exciting. So I have to give it as close to a 5 as I can. It's not quite a 5, but maybe like a 4.9.
Okay. So we're gonna. I will score it as a 4.5 because that's our rating system. So yeah, close enough. But a 4.9 if you could go by 0.1 increments. That's fair. I would probably lean to a 4. For me, somewhere between a 4 and a 4.5. I'm going to stick with a 4.5. The biggest detriment to me, like every Judd Apatow film or produced film that I have literally ever seen, is they are always about 20 to 30 minutes too long. Mm-hmm. He has I don't know how involved Apatow was in the production of this, but it always feels like he just can't quite wrap a story up. Like he gets so ingrained in the characters. Like I just want to talk about them more and more and more. And sometimes a movie that's great, and sometimes it's like, okay, we got the story and let's wrap it up. In a way, there are parts of this movie where you do kind of want to see more of that story, but that part of the story was done. And I think it was maybe about 15 to 20 minutes, a little too long. So that was part of it. Kumail's portrayal of that character, he's portraying himself, obviously, it's a little rough in the beginning. Like there's a lot of like, I'm acting kind of thing. But after about 15 minutes, he is just clearly himself. And I thought that was really cool. So if I had to nitpick it, which I don't really like to do in movies too much, but if I had to nitpick it, like it was a little rough in the beginning, but once the story really got rolling, like you could tell like the emotion of that story was like, really there. So
yeah, and there was a point, which without spoilers, but there was a point during one of the stand-ups when I really felt connected to him. You know, it was a moment where he shed the layers and really became real to me. And I may have shed a tear.
Yeah,
that scene.
Look, okay, so we won't give away spoilers, obviously, but if you watch the trailer, this part that we're going to talk about is not a surprise, right? This is just the premise of the film, which is Kumail's character meets this woman. He's an Uber driver, incidentally. He meets this woman, and he's also a stand-up comic. And he meets this woman at a club, and there's a couple of scenes of him like trying to pick up other white women, and like that's also a big part of it, just because he's Pakistani, right? And so he meets this woman, they start dating, everything is going great, but he's also fighting sort of the issues of being a Pakistani guy who was raised in America. He was born in Pakistan, but raised by his parents in America. And they want him to do an arranged marriage and all this other stuff. So he's fighting against these kind of two worlds.
Well, and I think the other layer there is that not only is he Pakistani, but he's Muslim.
Yes,
and
which is actually the bigger part than him just being Pakistani.
Yeah, yeah, and that part of his parents assuming he's still practicing, and that tension between something I saw a lot growing up, where we would go to these Indian Association events, and it would be me and my half-breed brother and sister with all of these full Indian kids being raised in the U.S. And the tension, I remember, we always had my mom saying, "That's not how we do it here, Dad." But when there were the two Indian parents, it was like they brought them here for opportunities, but then they wouldn't let them actually fully become American. And it was a real tension between the kids and the parents. And it was interesting seeing how that played out in this film with religion, with culture, with behaviors, with marriage. All of that are similar struggles that I saw my Indian contemporaries struggling with their parents.
Right. Yeah. It was super interesting, one, to watch it with you, because obviously your parents are very, not very much like these characters, but they have dealt with some of the similarities of that these characters have gone through. And you and I are an interracial couple. Obviously, you're not a practicing Muslim or anything, but and obviously neither am I. But it is super interesting to watch those kind of dynamics and to experience those dynamics firsthand, and then see them sort of mirrored in some ways on screen. What did you think about? So the other big part of this is this idea that the woman he's dating, she gets sick and ends up in this coma. And so the latter 2/3 of the film have to do with Kumail trying to sort of connect with her parents who don't respect how he broke up with her, and the cultural things, like they don't quite understand it. So he's trying to like, no, I'm actually a good guy, but like I'm in the middle of this like craziness, and him trying to deal with his parents and all this other stuff. Did you think that they handled this idea of Kumail dealing with her parents well? What did you think of that sort of relationship? Her parents, by the way, are played by Holly Hunter and Ray Romano, who I thought were excellent. They were so good.
Yeah, it was interesting. I watched a Stephen Colbert interview with Kumail, and he was saying how the dialogue that you see in the trailer, the dialogue about Ray Romano asking about 9/11
Right.
to him, they never did that, right?
Right.
Yeah, not in real life. And so it was interesting to see and try to figure out the moments when it was written for the audience,
Right.
and when it was written autobiographically. And so it felt a little bit stilted at times, but what I really appreciated about the way it unfolded was you got to show up, right? For whatever it is you believe in, even against all odds, you still continue to show up. And that to me kind of felt like a metaphor for him continuing to show up on stand-up, on the stage.
Right,
and
exactly.
Him continuing to show up as who he is, as this Pakistani, Muslim-raised American man, right? I thought it was just interesting. It played a nice metaphor.
Yeah. I was really impressed by this movie. Like, I thought it was, it feels like 2017 has been, this might, like 2016, 2017 might be like the 2 years of South Asian men. Like, they are on a rise, right? You've got Lion with Dev Patel. You've got you've got Kal Penn, who is on Designated Survivor, who is very good on that. You've got Aziz Ansari, who is just absolutely destroying television with Master of None, which was so
Season
great.
2, gotta watch it if you haven't.
Yeah, it was great, and we actually have a review up. Mike and I sat down and talked about that, and now this, and it's kind of cool to see these diverse perspectives, and it's not just diverse in race, because this movie has far less to do with race than it does diversity of religion, which being Muslim is far the big thing that's hanging over this. And it's not even, what I liked about it is it wasn't Islam is correct and these other religions are not correct, or the vice versa. It wasn't that. It was simply done from the perspective of, this is how this culture handles things, and this is how this other one handles it.
It was the ritual of religion.
Right.
And it's interesting you brought up Aziz Ansari, because while watching this, I thought a lot about the one episode in season 2 when Aziz engages with growing up being Muslim, like what that was like. I think it was the Thanksgiving episode.
Maybe. I don't know what you're
It was
referencing.
where he eats bacon at a friend's house.
Yeah, that was a Thanksgiving episode.
Yeah. And it reveals him being Americanized and really not aligning with the faith, but having that tension of culture between what his family historically has believed in, right? And where he is now in this new culture, being raised as this third culture kid, not Indian or not Pakistani, depending on who we're talking about, and not American, right? It's something of the blend of the two.
Right.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I think that this movie and sort of these other movies that we just discussed, or the other TV shows, I think it's good for a lot of reasons, but what it's best for, to me, is you get to actually see these other cultures, these other people given the spotlight for a moment. And when you do that, you go, okay, these people are not that different from me. Or maybe they're really different from me, but that's interesting and I want to find out more about it.
And
I
that's
think that's
also
important.
American, which I think is really beautiful. It's expanding the idea of what being American looks like.
Yes, because to the shock of almost no one actually paying attention, America is very different. So that's what's really cool. And this movie actually proves that and does a really good job of dealing with that. So that is it for us on this episode of Coming Distractions. Again, check out The Big Sick. It's in theaters right now.
Bye.
Bye.